Let me think. That there's a lot of memories. I think in general, there's growing up, and I'm not sure that there's one specific show or event. There was a combination of multiple things because as a kid, my dad, I started playing in a band when I was 12 with my father's band. And whomever sees this video, if they're from Stafford and particularly are familiar with my background, and when you say Frog Newton, that was my dad. That's his nickname. Everybody had, you talking about something different? Well, that generation, who are now in like 80s, 90s, and most are no longer with us, they all had nicknames. Every one of them had a nickname. Well, my dad was Frog Newton. And so, he was an outgoing personality. And a lot of people, Dad was one of these guys that you could put in a room. The next thing you know, he'd come out of the room, he'd have everybody friends with everybody. And so he always took me around to different shows and being in his band and playing in different events throughout the county, whether they're private parties or whether they were outdoor festivals or crab feast or whatever it might have been, are all part of the musical journey and all part of the experiences that you take as a young person and that you treasure. So I'm not so sure it's a specific thing. It's a combination of all of that is deeply rooted in me, that has shaped me, There used to be, I'm just coming off the top of my head, but there used to be a place called Emerald Downs, which I believe was, it was sort of kind of where Stafford High School is at Crane's Corner off of Route 1. Is it? I haven't been, I think Stafford's still there, isn't it? And in that area, there was a family, the Heflin family, that started a bluegrass festival, and it ran for, I don't know, not long, 4 years maybe. And they actually had a horse track called Emerald Downs, but they also incorporated once a year a 2-day bluegrass festival. And that was probably the 72 or 3, somewhere along in there. And I was, 15, 16 years old, and it was sort of but they'd also bring in national acts in bluegrass music, so it was a big deal. I mean, they brought in some top talent in those days. And I worked with a band at the time, which was like, after my father's band, I transitioned to this next step, to this more polished. We all wore the same clothes. We rehearsed, we'd go out here in Stafford, we'd play more jobs, and it's like, this is kind of, we're professionals here on a part-time basis, but we felt like we were a big deal, which was fun back in those days. And they were called Cabin Hill, and there was 2 brothers, Wayne and Emery Shover, who are from Stafford, and they grew up, in music in Stafford, and so I played guitar. That was like my first cool, I've graduated, from my father's band to the next level, and we used to play that festival, and it was called, what was it called? It was at Emerald Downs, and forgive me, the name of the event slips me right now, but it was a real critical time because it put us on stage, put me on stage and the band on stage, and it was like a showcase being in front of, I think they might have had, maybe on a good day, they might have, with weather and everything, they might have had 1,000 people out in the audience or something. So it like made you feel like, all right, I've made it, because you're out there playing in front of educated fans, and you're on the same bill with national talent, and it just felt like you were you were a part of all of that and you were accepted. So that's one event in an early age that stands out in my mind. And of course it was in Stafford. I don't recall exactly, it was called Emerald Downs. And I'm not sure exactly what type of horses that they ran, but it didn't last very long. But it wasn't, I don't know what level. I'd have to go back and do some research on that. But it was called Emerald Downs, and I remember the family was, the last name was Heflins, that owned the property, that built this track. And they had, I think, some future plans, but I'm not quite sure what ended up happening. But they also incorporated different events during the course of the year. Bluegrass Festival was one of them. So it brought people into the county from a local to a regional to a national level because they had national talent. And it went on for 2 or 3 years. And as a young man, I mean, that was a big deal, for me, because, man, I thought I was like, I've made the big time, which it's all part of the growing process, as you play music for a living. Unrelated to music, I still like to go back to where I come from, and that's White Oak. And so if I go down Belle Plains Road off of 218, they used to call it the Stagecoach Road years and years ago, but Belle Plains Road, which, if you go down that road all the way down to the Potomac, you'll probably look at every other mailbox on the left and right and see Newton, So, and the Newtons, the Jets, the Greens, the Sullivans, all of us sort of married into each other's families. So it's like, it's a family tree that is heavily connected through that heritage. I don't do it as often as I would like, but when I try to find the time when I come back home to just get in the car, get behind a wheel. My parents have deceased. I lost my father in 87 at 55 years of age. My mother passed in 94 at 62 years of age. So that generation, and as I said, is pretty much gone. Now my generation, in the 50 to 60, I'm 57, we're still around, but it's not a lot of, but then the younger generations under that, they don't really remember, that unless somebody takes time to tell them about it or they take an interest in it. But again, young people, sometimes they don't reconnect to that stuff, and unless they have an interest in it. So for me, when I come home, I like to just get into the car and drive down Belle Plains Road or drive down Bethel Church Road, in my case, because that's where my family's from, in that area of Stafford. Go to the river. Just get out of the car and look, and just take it all in and reflect, because I know that's where I come from. And you get caught up in life, and next thing you know, that stuff is gone. And so I think the older you get, the more reflection you have and the more that's important to you. So for me, when I come back to the area, I try not to get so caught up in work, and just take a deep breath, get away and enjoy and do some reflecting.